Picture this. You're working on a railroad in 1848. A metal rod over 3 feet long blasts through your skull at high speed. It enters below your cheekbone and shoots out the top of your head. You should be dead, right? Nope. Somehow, you stand up, speak, and live for another 12 years. This isn't some weird sci-fi story. This actually happened to a guy named Phineas Gage, and his survival threw everything doctors thought they knew about the brain into complete chaos. Our brain, this bizarre 3-pound blob of tissue with more connections than stars in the Milky Way, is still the wildest frontier in human science. We've sent robots to Mars and mapped the human genome, but we're still scratching our heads about the very organ doing all that thinking. And while most people have heard of Phineas Gage, his case is just the tip of the iceberg. We're about to dive into several mind-blowing cases of people who survived brain catastrophes and came out dramatically changed. From regular folks who suddenly became mathematical geniuses after head trauma, to people who woke up speaking with foreign accents. From split brain patients with 2 separate consciousnesses, to a neuroscientist who experienced her own stroke in real time. So let's dive into the strange world where devastating brain injuries don't end stories. They start entirely new ones. The classic case, Phineas Gage's iron rod. September 13th, 1848. A normal workday turned neuroscience legend. Phineas Gage, just 25 years old, was doing his job as a railroad foreman in Vermont. He was using a tamping iron, basically a giant metal pole, to pack explosives into a hole. Then, boom, a spark hit the powder. The 13-pound iron shot upward like a missile, punched through his left cheek, tore behind his eye, ripped through his brain's left frontal lobe, and burst out the top of his skull. The crazy part? Gage didn't die, not even close. His doctor, John Harlow, wrote that Gage got up within a few minutes, rode upright in a cart for over half a mile, and then walked up a long flight of stairs to his hotel. Just let that sink in for a second. The dude had a metal rod blast through his brain and then climbed some stairs. But surviving wasn't even the weirdest part of Gage's story. His thinking abilities stayed intact. He could reason, talk, and remember stuff fine. But his friends started noticing something off. This wasn't the same Phineas. The formerly energetic, shrewd, and persistent guy became what his buddies described as no longer Gage. He turned impulsive, started swearing constantly, couldn't stick to plans, and ignored social norms. His doctor wrote it best. The balance between his intellectual faculties and animal propensities seems to have been destroyed. Translation: the responsible, thinking part of Gage got disconnected from the emotional, instinctual part. What this case showed us was revolutionary. First, it proved you could actually survive serious brain trauma, which shocked doctors at the time. Second, and more profoundly, it showed that specific brain regions control specific aspects of personality. Gage's frontal lobe damage mainly affected his social behavior and impulse control, while leaving his intellect intact. This was the first real evidence that different parts of your brain handle different aspects of who you are. Gage lived 12 more years before dying from seizures. Today, you can visit his skull and the infamous rod at Harvard Medical School. Physical proof of the day: a brain injury changed neuroscience forever. If Gage showed us how brain damage can change who we are, acquired Savant syndrome reveals something way weirder: how getting your brain scrambled can sometimes unlock superhuman abilities you never had before. Take Jason Paget. In 2002, he was just a regular dude, furniture salesman, college dropout, zero interest in math. Then, one night, outside a karaoke bar, he got jumped. The brutal attack left him with a severe concussion and PTSD. But as he healed, something flat-out bizarre happened. The world literally started looking different to him. Suddenly, everywhere he looked, he saw mathematical patterns, intricate geometric designs layered over everything, like he could see the matrix code behind reality. He became obsessed with pi and started hand-drawing incredibly complex fractals that mathematicians couldn't believe. I see shapes and angles everywhere in real life. Paget says. Every single little curve I see as a calculation. Let that sink in. Dude goes from math hater to mathematical genius because someone hit him in the head. His doctors called it acquired Savant syndrome with synesthesia. His brain injury rewired connections that let him literally see math concepts most of us can't even imagine. And Paget's not the only one. Remember Orlando Sorrell? Normal 10-year-old kid until a baseball smacked him on the left side of his head. After that, he could instantly tell you what day of the week any date fell on and remember the weather and what he was doing on every single day since the accident. My personal favorite is Derek Amato. In 2006, this guy with basically zero musical training dived into the shallow end of a pool, got a nasty concussion, and woke up with an overwhelming urge to play piano. When he sat down at a keyboard, his fingers just knew what to do. He started playing like someone who'd practiced for decades. How? He says he sees black and white blocks, almost like a music sheet, that guide his fingers. What makes these cases so mind-bending is what they suggest about human potential. These weren't trained geniuses who recovered lost skills. These were ordinary people who suddenly gained abilities they never had before. It challenges our entire understanding of talent and genius. It suggests something crazy. What if Mozart-level talent exists in all of us, just locked behind neural wiring we can't normally access? What if the next math genius or musical prodigy is just one, very specific, brain injury away? Imagine going to sleep as your normal self and waking up sounding like you're from a completely different country. That's exactly what happened to a Norwegian woman in 1941 after a German bomb raid left her with a brain injury. The wild part? When she regained consciousness, her Norwegian accent had vanished, replaced with what sounded to everyone like a German accent. Talk about terrible timing during Nazi occupation. This bizarre condition, foreign accent syndrome, is so rare that only about 100 cases have been documented worldwide. It's like your brain decides to play the world's weirdest practical joke on you. Take Judy Roberts, who had a stroke in 1999. She went to bed with her normal Midwestern American accent and woke up sounding British, despite never having set foot in the UK. As she told researchers, "I went to bed sounding like myself, and I woke up sounding like I'm from England." Or Lisa Alamia from Texas, who in 2016 had simple jaw surgery and somehow emerged speaking with what everyone described as a British accent. For months, doctors and linguists were completely stumped. Here's the really weird part. These people aren't actually speaking with genuine foreign accents. They don't suddenly know British or French speech patterns. What's happening is their brain injury messes with the parts controlling rhythm, intonation, and specific speech sounds. All that linguistic stuff called prosody. The resulting weird speech just happens to sound like a foreign accent to native listeners. The damage typically hits the left hemisphere, especially language areas like Broca's area, or connections to the cerebellum that coordinate speech movements. It's like someone rewired your speech circuits, and now all your words come out in the wrong rhythm. What's particularly messed up about FAS is how it affects identity. Your voice is one of your most personal traits. It's core to how you express yourself and how others recognize you. Suddenly people ask, "Where are you from?" And when you say, "I was born right here," they think you're lying. Many FAS patients feel like their own voice has been hijacked, like an imposter is speaking through them. Talk about an identity crisis. The split brain, when one mind becomes two. In the 1960s, doctors came up with a last resort treatment for people with severe epilepsy, literally cutting the brain in half. Well, not entirely. They severed the corpus callosum, that thick bundle of nerve fibers connecting your brain's left and right hemispheres. The procedure, called a corpus callosotomy, stopped seizures from spreading across the whole brain, but it created something absolutely mind-blowing. Two separate consciousnesses living in one skull. Scientists Michael Gazzaniga and Roger Sperry ran experiments on these split-brain patients that will seriously mess with your concept of self. They'd show an image only to the right brain hemisphere by displaying it only in the left visual field. Since language centers typically live in the left hemisphere, patients couldn't verbally describe what they saw, but, and this is the freaky part, they could use their left hand, controlled by the right hemisphere, to draw or point to what they'd seen. In one famous experiment, they showed a split brain patient the word heart with he visible only to the right brain and art visible only to the left. Asked what he saw, the patient said art. That's the verbal left brain talking. But when asked to point with his left hand, controlled by the right brain, to related images, he pointed to pictures of a man relating to he that only his right brain had seen. Even weirder, when researchers secretly told just the right hemisphere to walk, the person would stand up and start walking. When asked why they stood up, the left hemisphere, which had no idea about the command, would make up a completely false explanation. These patients literally had two minds operating independently in one body. The verbal left brain, not knowing why the body was doing something because the right brain initiated it, would instantly create fake explanation. This research blew scientists' minds because it suggested something profound. Maybe our feeling of being one unified consciousness is just a story our brain tells itself to make sense of its own fragmented functioning. Maybe what we experience as a single, unified self is actually more like different brain modules working together and creating an illusion of unity. The case of HM, living in an eternal present. Imagine if every person you met was always a stranger. If every movie was always new, if you could read the same mystery novel 100 times and always be surprised by the ending. That was life for Henry Molaison, known as HM in scientific papers, until his death in 2008. In 1953, desperate to control Henry's severe epilepsy, surgeons removed large chunks of his medial temporal lobes, including most of his hippocampus. The seizures improved, but something else happened. Henry lost the ability to form new memory. Anything that happened after 1953 vanished from his mind within minutes. Each morning, researchers would introduce themselves to HM, and each time it was like they were meeting for the very first time. He could chat normally, but if you distracted him for just a moment, maybe by dropping your pen, he'd forget your entire conversation had ever happened. Gone. Completely wiped. Henry described his constant confusion perfectly. It was like waking from a dream. Every day is alone in itself. But here's the twist that blew scientists' minds. HM could still learn new physical skills. When taught the super tricky task of drawing while only looking at his hand in a mirror, he got better day after day, despite having zero memory of ever practicing before. When asked how he was so good at it, he'd say he had no idea. He must just be naturally talented. This discovery revolutionized our understanding of memory. It proved that memory isn't just one system, but several different ones working together. His case showed that knowing that memory, facts, and events lives in different brain structures than knowing how memory, skills, and habits. The hippocampus handles the first kind, but motor skills get stored elsewhere, which is why HM could still learn new physical abilities despite having no memory of practicing them. For almost 50 years until his death, Henry participated in countless studies, becoming the most studied brain in neuroscience history. Think about that sacrifice, living in an eternal present, never recognizing the doctors and scientists who became your closest companions, never knowing how much you were contributing to science. All those discoveries, including the fundamental division between knowing that, declarative, and knowing how, procedural memory, came from one man frozen in time. Most brain injury stories come from doctors observing patients. But what happens when the patient is the brain doctor? That's what makes Dr. Jill Bolte Taylor's case so mind-blowing. She's both a Harvard-trained neuroanatomist and someone who experienced a massive stroke. She literally watched her own brain malfunction with the training to understand exactly what was happening. On December 10th, 1996, a blood vessel in the left side of Taylor's brain burst. Unlike most stroke victims, she recognized the symptoms in real time. As she describes in her book, My Stroke of Insight, she had front row seats to her own brain breakdown. In the course of 4 hours, I watched my brain completely deteriorate in its ability to process all information. On the morning of the stroke, I could not walk, talk, read, write, or recall any of my life. Here's where it gets trippy. The stroke hit Taylor's left hemisphere, the part responsible for language, logic, and linear thinking. As that shut down, her right hemisphere, associated with creativity, intuition, and holistic awareness, took over completely. What happened next sounds more like a spiritual awakening than a medical emergency. Taylor experienced a complete dissolution of the boundaries between herself and the universe. The analytical categorizing functions that normally separate me from everything else went offline, and she perceived reality as an interconnected energy flow. Felt enormous and expansive, like a genie liberated from its bottle, she writes. My spirit soared free like a whale gliding through a sea of silent euphoria. After 8 years of rehab, Taylor recovered most of her cognitive abilities, but she wasn't the same person. She'd gained something remarkable: the ability to consciously shift between left brain analytical thinking and right brain experiential awareness. It's a kind of cognitive superpower most of us never develop. Her case provides extraordinary insights into hemispheric specialization and raises profound questions about consciousness. If brain damage can so dramatically transform our perception of reality, what does that tell us about the nature of consciousness itself? Is our typical perception just one of many possible ways to experience existence? So how does the brain pull off these seemingly impossible recoveries? The answer is neuroplasticity, the brain's remarkable ability to rewire itself on the fly, and it's completely upended what we thought we knew about the brain. For decades, scientists clung to a pretty depressing idea. Once you hit adulthood, your brain was basically set in stone. Neural pathways laid down in childhood, those were your brain's final answer. Damage something? Too bad. So sad. It's gone forever. But that dogma started cracking in the 1960s and has now been completely demolished. Turns out your brain is constantly remodeling itself, even as you're reading this sentence. Let's look at how it pulls off these incredible recovery tricks. First, there's synaptic plasticity, brain rewiring at its most basic. Connections between neurons can strengthen or weaken based on how often they fire together. As Canadian psychologist Donald Hebb put it, neurons that fire together, wire together. Your brain is literally reshaping its connections with every experience. Then there's unmasking. Think of this like your brain's backup systems coming online. Some neural pathways normally stay dormant, suppressed by your dominant circuits. When those main pathways get damaged, these secondary connections can suddenly wake up and take over. This might explain how regular people suddenly develop savant abilities after injuries. There's also sprouting. This one's wild. Healthy neurons can literally grow new branches to reach out and connect with other neurons, creating detours around damaged areas. Your brain is basically regrowing its own wiring. Your brain loves backup plans too. For many functions, it maintains multiple neural pathways that can do similar jobs. Lose one route? No problem. Traffic gets rerouted through alternative circuits. One of the most impressive adaptations is cross-modal reassignment, where brain regions normally dedicated to one sense can be hijacked for completely different purposes. In blind people, parts of the visual cortex get repurposed for touch and hearing, supercharging those senses. And finally, there's neurogenesis, the newest kid on the block. We now know the adult brain can actually generate brand new neurons, especially in the hippocampus. This was considered impossible just a few decades ago. Young brains generally bounce back better, and certain brain regions recover more easily than others. Rehabilitation matters too. Pushing those recovering circuits with therapy helps them rebuild faster. Even cooler, enriched environments with lots of stimulation dramatically enhance recovery, as does plain old exercise, which increases production of brain-derived neurotrophic factor, basically miracle grow for neurons. The wild cases we've explored aren't just medical oddities. They're windows into the brain's incredible talent for adaptation, showing us neuroplasticity pushed to its absolute limits. The musician trapped in a moment, Clive wearing. Imagine waking up every few minutes thinking it's the first time you've been conscious in years, every single time. That's the reality for Clive wearing, often described as having the worst case of amnesia ever documented. In 1985, Waring, a renowned British musician and conductor, contracted herpes simplex encephalitis, a viral infection that ravaged his brain, particularly his hippocampus. The damage left him with both retrograde amnesia, inability to access old memories, and extreme anterograde amnesia, inability to form new ones. His memory span? About 7 to 30 seconds. Waring experiences each moment as if he's just woken up from a coma. In his journal, he writes entries like, "I am now awake, or "I am now conscious," often crossing out previous entries made minutes before, convinced they were written when he was unconscious. Each entry feels like the first one he's ever made. He's completely trapped in what he calls a moment of consciousness and nothing more. When his wife Deborah enters the room after being gone for just minutes, he greets her with the enthusiasm of someone reuniting after years, often crying with joy and telling her how much he missed her. If she leaves for even a moment, he has no memory of her visit and fears she's abandoned him. Their story was chronicled in the heartbreaking documentary, The Man with the 7-Second Memory. But here's the brain-bending twist. Despite not recognizing his piano, Waring can still sit down and play beautifully. Despite not remembering that he was a conductor, he can read musical notation and perform with the skill built over decades of practice. Despite having no conscious access to his musical knowledge, his fingers remember what his mind cannot. Waring's case is particularly valuable because it shows the clear-cut distinction between different memory systems. His procedural memory, how to play piano, is virtually intact, while his episodic memory, personal experiences, and semantic memory, facts and knowledge, are severely damaged. When Waring plays piano, he becomes fully present, momentarily freed from his temporal prison. In those moments of musical flow, as his fingers dance across the keys playing Bach or Beethoven, he briefly transcends his condition. He still lives with his wife Deborah, falling in love with her anew each time she enters the room, experiencing a lifetime of reunions in a single day. The woman who feels no fear, patient SM. Imagine going through life completely unable to feel fear. No panic during a life-threatening situation. No anxiety before public speaking. No terror when someone holds a knife to your throat. For most of us, that sounds like either a superpower or a nightmare. For a woman known as patient SM in the scientific literature, it's reality. SM suffers from a rare genetic condition called Urbach-Vitha disease, which caused calcium deposits to form in her amygdala, the brain's fear center, eventually destroying this almond-shaped structure entirely. While the rest of her brain functions normally, SM has lived for decades without the ability to experience fear. In a series of experiments conducted by neuroscientist Antonio Damasio and his team, SM was exposed to situations that would terrify most people. They took her to an exotic pet store and encouraged her to touch snakes and tarantulas. Her reaction? Pure curiosity. She wanted to touch the snake's tongue and was disappointed when researchers insisted she maintain a safe distance. When shown horrifying film clips, she laughed. When taken through a haunted house attraction, while other participants screamed in terror, SM excited the actors by approaching them with fascination. But this fearlessness has a dangerous side. SM has repeatedly put herself in life-threatening situations. She's walked through dangerous neighborhoods at night, approached threatening strangers, and has been held at gunpoint and knife point multiple times, all without feeling the normal alarm signals that would make others flee. It is quite remarkable that she's still alive, one researcher noted. What makes SM's case so valuable to neuroscience is how targeted her impairment is. She can experience all other emotions, happiness, sadness, disgust, surprise, completely normally. She can describe what fear is conceptual. She just can't feel it herself. It's the perfect neurological experiment. Remove one specific brain structure and observe exactly what function disappears. Her case dramatically confirmed what scientists suspected, that the amygdala is absolutely essential for feeling fear, and it demonstrates how crucial fear is as a survival mechanism. Fear isn't just an unpleasant feeling, it's a sophisticated threat detection system that keeps us alive, a system patient SM must navigate life without. The human brain, this weird, squishy 3-pound universe machine, just keeps defying everything we think we know about it. We've mapped its anatomy, we've identified its specialized regions, we've scanned it a million different ways, but these extraordinary cases show how much we still have to learn. From Phineas Gage surviving an iron rod through his skull to come out with a completely different personality, to Jason Padgett gaining mathematical superpowers after a violent attack, each case reveals something profound about how our brains work. HEM's eternal present shows us that different types of memory live in different brain regions. His inability to form new new declarative memories while still learning motor skills prove that knowing facts and knowing how use completely different neural pathways. Foreign accent syndrome demonstrates how fragile our speech patterns actually are. A small injury to specific language centers can completely transform how we sound to others, changing not just what we say, but a core part of how we present ourselves to the world. Split brain patients reveal we might actually have two separate consciousnesses living side by side. The experiments with these patients raise profound questions about what it means to be a unified self and suggest our feeling of being one coherent mind might actually be an illusion. Jill Bolte Taylor's stroke of insight gives us a neuroscientist's perspective from inside brain damage. Her first-hand account of experiencing her left hemisphere shut down while her right hemisphere took over shows how dramatically different modes of consciousness can exist within the same brain. Patient SM shows what happens when a single emotion, fear, gets completely eliminated. Her case proves that specific emotions depend on specific brain structures and demonstrates how crucial fear is as a survival mechanism that most of us take for granted. Clive Waring's musical abilities persist despite catastrophic memory loss, showing us that talent and skill can remain even when the memories of acquiring them are gone. His case proves that our brains store different types of information in completely different ways. These aren't just weird medical oddities collected for shock value. Each case is like a natural experiment that helps reveal how specific brain functions work. When something breaks in precisely the right way, we get to see exactly what that broken part was responsible for, and sometimes what hidden abilities emerge when certain brain functions get out of the way. What makes these neural comeback stories so fascinating isn't just how the brain fails, but how it adapts and finds new pathways forward. Even after the most catastrophic damage, the brain's remarkable plasticity allows it to reorganize, reroute, and sometimes even improve. In these ordinary brains doing extraordinary things, we glimpse both the fragility and the incredible resilience of the organ that makes us who we are. The brain doesn't just recover, it reimagines. It doesn't just repair, it reinvents. And each of these remarkable cases gives us a window into the astonishing complexity that creates our experience of being human.